Welcome to Anything and Nothing, where we talk about a little bit of anything and a whole lot of nothing. Today I've got Dr. Fisher here with me. Welcome to the show, Dr. Fisher.
Thank you. I'm honored.
Nice. And we'll get into the questions and everything a little bit, but again, this is just a regular conversation. That's all this is, just having a conversation.
Yep.
So how's your day been going so far today, sir?
So far, wonderful.
Good.
This has been a big part of it right here.
Oh, cool. Well, I look forward to having you on too.
Thank you.
I like having conversations with folks and getting to know them. So.
Yes, sir.
So, all right. Everybody calls you Doc. Where'd that come from?
It came from Barbara's children.
Okay.
When I married her, and they were little kids in grade school.
Okay.
And I was a professor teaching at a university where Barbara was a student, graduate student. And I met the kids on campus riding bikes, and I developed an affinity and affection for them and kind of adopted them, and then learned who their mother was.
Okay.
So then I I say I got smitten.
Yeah.
By the family, and the kids started calling me Doc.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. So how many kids do you have? You have a larger family?
I have two children from a previous marriage who was white and lasted for about 20-some years. So I have two children from there.
Yeah. A
boy and a girl, and they're all close. Chris and Chris Senior's age.
Yes, sir.
And they live in Kansas.
Okay.
That's where I'm from. So that is my previous marriage, and then my marriage to Barbara, Chris Senior's mother.
Right.
And then she has three boys.
Okay. So, you originally from Kansas?
Yep.
How was that growing up? Like, when did you come to the South?
I came to the South, and I came to the South after being smitten, with Barbara and the family.
Yeah.
Okay, I came to the South from I was an associate professor at Quincy College in Quincy, Illinois. That's about 80 miles north of Southern Illinois University.
Okay.
Where I was a professor and Barbara was a student.
Gotcha.
And that's where I met her and her family. So I took a job at Quincy College. It was a Catholic school.
Right.
And was teaching there. And then that's where Barbara and I decided to get married. She came up and we smittened each other and got married. And she then took a job in Columbia, South Carolina after graduating with a PhD in elementary education.
Okay.
At Allen University.
Okay. As
the dean.
Right.
Right out of college.
Wow.
And after 1 year of that, she said, I'd be glad to be the chairman of the Department of Elementary Education there.
Okay.
But she didn't want to be dean anymore.
Right.
So she talked the president of the University of Allen University in talking me to come down and interview for being the dean.
Okay.
From Quincy, Illinois. So I said, okay, I'll do that. So I came south.
Yeah. Did you miss the cold any?
I missed it like a headache.
Yeah, my family's originally from Indiana.
I got you.
So I was raised down here.
Yeah.
But I know what you mean. When my grandfather passed and we went to bury him, it was like negative 13 degrees outside, and they actually had to put a tent up and heat the ground so they could bury him. I was like, man. But anyhow.
Well, I graduated from Indiana University.
Oh, cool.
In 1971 with a doctorate degree. So I've lived in Indiana many years, yeah.
Okay, so you kind of been all over the place. Is that because you were in the military?
No. My military service was on the East Coast and West Coast of the United States as a Marine. But then I got to I have the ambition to travel a lot, and so that's what I've been doing.
That's awesome.
In the United States and in the world.
Right. So, me and your son are good fans of Thailand. Have you been to Thailand?
No. Next time you go, if you can put me in your pocket, I'll go with you. So.
It's definitely a good place to visit.
Yeah. I haven't been in the East. I've been in the West and the Middle East a lot.
Right, okay.
But not in the Far East.
What's been your favorite country to visit?
Australia.
Okay. I heard Australia was beautiful.
You've been there?
I haven't. I've heard it's good, though.
Well, it's a England's English settlement.
Gotcha.
And I have friends over there. So that's one reason I like it. But back when I was drinking beer more, you can imagine the pubs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was taking my share of that.
Right.
Then.
Wasn't it intended to be like a prison island or something like that?
Well, that's where the English sent their criminals.
Okay.
Back in those old days.
Yeah.
And so you can see the criminality still somewhat exists there.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, not literally, but they're just free-spirited.
Right. Okay. So you were born like in the 30s, is that correct?
I was born in 1933.
Wow. So what was life growing up like back then and as you were growing up?
Well, in 1933, of course, where I was born and raised is in the Flint Hills of Kansas.
Right.
Where the Flint Hills of Kansas is a term that can refers to hills covered with grass that was good for raising cattle.
Right.
But it also refers to a valley of a river.
Right.
So the river valley was where the good silt was. And then through the land grants that were given people back in those old days, my great-great-granddaddy migrated to that area and bought and got arranged with 180 acres of farmland.
Okay.
That silt, good wheat, corn land.
So your family was like farmers?
My family, my mom and dad, when I was born, my daddy, when I was born in 33, was a mechanic in a small town of only about 50 people where I grew up, Front Street and Back Street. And I mention that, Robin, because he was one of the many men in the United States in the early 30s that learned to be car mechanics.
Yeah.
And they learned to be car mechanics by working on Model T cars.
Oh, wow.
There was no school.
Yeah.
But he was good enough, ambition enough to learn how the internal combustion engine works.
Right.
Started up a little mechanic shop and hired a blacksmith. So he set himself up in business and took care of tractors and trucks in that little farm community in the early 30s and then on into the 40s.
Yeah, so that's something I never really thought about because my dad taught me how to work on cars.
Yes.
I never really thought of the first cars like this. He actually had to create the parts?
Well, that's a good point. No, somewhat yes, somewhat no.
Sometimes?
Sometime, but that's why I alluded to the fact that he hired a blacksmith.
Yeah, that's why I was,
Yeah. And some of the parts that a blacksmith could make, they'd be mostly body parts, but strict engine parts.
Right.
He wouldn't have that refinement, so he knew how to order those.
Yeah.
But the blacksmith friend did a lot of body work for him. Yeah.
Okay. Did he teach you how to work on cars and have you working in there too?
No.
Okay.
No. I was born in 33, and I remember when I was 4 or 5 years old before I started school. I started school when I was 5.
Yeah.
They got me Leonard and me off the streets because the old men were teaching us how to smoke and talk dirty.
Teaching you all the bad stuff.
All the good, bad stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, no, I remember going into his shop and memory tells me how I used to go in, and of course the shop was where they had the pit, where they had to get into to work under the car.
Right.
But also there's always little pools of oil around.
Yeah.
They weren't spick and span like now.
For sure.
So I used to get my hand there and put that oil on my hair to make it lay down. So I have very fond memories of his mechanic shop.
Okay. Cool. What's your favorite memory of like the mechanic shop?
Well, that.
Oh, okay. Just slicking your hair back and all that. Just spending time.
Well, that yes, and that what I grew up with Leonard.
Yeah.
Leonard was a year younger than I.
Okay.
And Leonard lived across the street from me in this town. And Leonard lived with his grandparents. And I mention that because Leonard and I, we ran free in the town.
Right.
All right. Now I mention that because there's only a front street and a back street and a few houses and about 50 people living in the town.
Yeah.
And I mention that because Leonard and I running the town, we began, as I alluded to, the old men sitting on the porch of the hotel, smoking cigars and cigarettes. We got to picking up cigarette butts.
Right.
And taking the cigarette butts and going to the outside toilet.
Yeah.
There was only toilets outside.
Right.
And the outside toilet, one of them was behind my dad's mechanic shop.
Yeah.
And that's one place that Leonard and I would go into the toilet, shut the door, strip the butts, and take the toilet paper and roll cigarettes and smoke. Well, we were doing that one time, and my fond memory was my dad caught us. He came out and saw the smoke or did something. We were. And so, but we were both dizzy from the smoke. Yeah. And I was sick, and so was Leonard. So Daddy caught us. And chased us home. And I laid down in the front yard of the house and vomited. Yeah. And Leonard went across the street where he lived and vomited.
Yeah. They probably didn't have a whole lot of mixing additives and stuff in the tobacco then either, did they?
No.
Yeah.
No.
So I don't have a similar story, but I remember my first time smoking. Thankfully, I haven't smoked in years and years and years. Okay. It messed my lungs up pretty bad.
Yeah.
But I had a similar story. Me and my brother were finding my parents' cigarette butts and did this pretty similar thing.
Well, what did you have? Tobacco paper or toilet paper? What do you roll them in?
we just found one. We found one and we just kind of packed it into we took the filter off and packed it into like a long piece. Yeah,
I got you. Yeah.
Yeah. But where were your parents originally from?
Well, my father was from a town 5 miles west of this little town where I'm telling you about.
Right.
The little town I'm telling you about was named Clements and still is.
Okay.
There are only 2 people living there now.
Yeah.
But he lived on the farm with his parents in that next 5 miles away and grew up being a farmer.
Right.
But he grew up being a farmer working horses, of course, at that time. That was before tractors were really coming in.
Right.
So he grew up 5 miles away from that little town where he became a son of a farmer. And my mother, she lived in another town in Kansas, but came to Clements.
Yeah.
And was working in the post office.
Right.
And that's where Daddy and my mother met at Clements.
Yeah.
Her working in the post office.
Okay.
But my daddy is the one that lived in the county all that time.
I gotcha. Yeah. So what was the school system and stuff like that like back then?
Well, the school system, they had it.
Yeah.
And the school system that I participated in at the age of 5 was a school building that had been recently built.
Right.
In the Clements Township on the hill away from the floods.
Right.
And the brick, and it wasn't a one-room school.
Okay.
There were a lot of one-room schools still in the farm areas.
Right.
But mine was a combination of grade school and high school that had been built 5 or 6 years before I went there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it was in Clements.
Nice. Okay. And so how did you end up actually, like, at what point in your life did you go to the Marines? Because I know you said you were a Marine for a while.
Well, after living in Clements with my parents, and then my daddy and mom moving to the farm in Cedar Point, 5 miles away. He went back to farming,
right,
and using tractors that he bought and built an old tractor and put it on rubber wheels, etc. So I farmed. I was a farm kid. Until I grew up. I went through grade school and high school. And while in high school, I was a fairly good basketball player and track person. So after I graduated high school, I was recruited to go to Kansas State Teachers College to play basketball and be on the track team.
Cool.
So that got me into college. And then after college, during college, I belonged to a fraternity.
Right.
And the fraternity members were a group of guys that had a history of joining the Marine Corps,
right,
the platoon leaders class. So my junior year, I became a member of the platoon leaders class in Quantico, Virginia.
Oh, wow.
That's where we went in the summer,
yeah,
along with buddies. And and then Quantico, and after I graduated, then I went into officers training school, and Quantico for 8 months training, and then I went to Camp Pendleton, California, and took over some platoons and played a lot of war.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. So, how was the training back then? Was it as intense as people say?
Yes.
I mean,
I won't blink an eye. Yes.
First off, thank you for your service.
Yes.
But yeah, like from what I see now, like they put people in freezing water and have them doing all kinds of stuff for Marines. So,
well, it wasn't that intense. I mean, putting in freezing water.
Yeah.
But the little story I'll tell you, this takes a minute, is the one thing that our DIs, drill instructors, while I was in boot camp. Now, after I'm an officer, then I don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I do it to others.
Yeah, that's right.
But while I was in boot camp, the drill instructor, one thing they had a favorite thing to do was come into the hut where we lived with the barracks, beds and all, and yell, "Air raid!"
Oh,
now,
man.
That was a cue to what we were supposed to do.
Right.
And what we were supposed to do was open our locker where our clothes are, and crawl in the locker for protection.
Wow.
And close the door.
Yeah.
Until we're told, come out.
Yeah.
All right. So that, it wasn't brutal.
Yeah.
But it wasn't fun either.
Yeah, for sure. I get what you're saying. And obviously it makes sense. They call them drill sergeants because they're drilling. You got constant drills. You got.
That's right. And they did a good job.
Yeah. I mean, you prepare. That kind of made me think of. It's kind of funny. I think I'm probably one of the last generations where we actually had like drills where you would like, the nuclear bombs are dropping. Go in there and put the book over your head.
Well, we didn't, the atomic bomb kind of thing, that wasn't so much then. That was a that. Yeah. Well, more or less that. But, that's the kind of thing.
Right.
Well, they hit you with their swagger stick, hit you on the head.
Yeah.
Your helmet was there.
Right.
Yeah, so it was intense. But I admired it and respected those old boys and got along well.
So how long were you in the military?
Oh, well, I was in 2 years, I count it as reserves, in preparing to become full-time.
Right.
And then I was in 2 years of active duty.
Okay.
So a total of 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. When did philosophy first grab you?
Boy, that's a good question, and I have to say that it grabbed me, and it grabbed me when I was young.
Okay.
And I won't take a long time, but my buddies and I, when I went to the farm and met my kids, and we'd do a lot of hunting and fishing together.
Right. And
I mention that because we carried guns, shotguns, rifles, pistols around with us daily, all of what we wanted to.
Right.
But I mention that because for example, my buddy Gus who had rifles, and we'd go hunt squirrels and rabbits, etc.
Yeah.
And we'd get into the timber. We had 40 acres of timber on the farm, and we'd hunt in there.
Yeah.
And I noticed that he was better able at finding squirrels in trees than I.
Okay.
I could go with Gus, and we would go, and I'd see squirrels, but he spotted them quicker.
Right.
Now, I mentioned that because all the time I was hunting, I wasn't so much thinking about hunting.
Yeah.
I was thinking about whether I ought to be hunting or not.
Yeah.
So I had an early conscience about shooting the critters.
Right.
Yeah. And so I say that kind of developed me. I was early at that.
So basically, the question was like a value of life type thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you. That's a way to put it.
Okay. And is that kind of what got you into the thought process of wanting to be a professor? How'd that happen?
No. How that happened is, as I mentioned, I was fairly good athlete for the small schools that I was in, and went to college, and the basketball and track got me to college. But what do I major in?
Right.
Well, I didn't know anything, so physical education was what I majored in.
Okay.
All right, so while that major, though, in physical education required me to take a lot of science classes.
Right.
If you're a physical educator, you got to know about the physical body.
That's
so
right.
that's biology.
Right.
And chemistry. So there was sufficient number of courses in there that certified me to be a teacher of physical education, but also of science in small schools.
Yeah.
And that's always where I went. So the teaching of science in small schools over time, I now begin to wonder more about not only what's the right thing to do, but what's how does science work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a slew of interest in like biology in particular, and like cellular science, and it just baffles me. I think somebody, I can't remember who it was that said it, but they were saying if you were to take like the macro side of it, like and say like make me as big as the universe, I'd still be super tiny in comparison of the rest of the universe. But if you're talking about the smallest particle that there is, it's like you could make that smallest particle the size of Earth, and it would still vastly dwarf the size of the known universe. You know what I mean? So like the smaller things is kind of what interested me a little bit.
Well, you're making a distinction between big things and small things.
Yeah.
And contemporarily, I call it the 21st century science.
Right.
That distinction is being made between the big things like the universe and all the things in it.
Yeah, like quarks and.
Well, no, those
quarks
are
tiny things.
The small things. Yeah. But galaxies.
You're talking about galaxies and stars and star
quarks,
systems.
Those are the two words we could use for that purpose.
Yeah.
The very large and the very small. But that's physical. That's not. There's sufficient evidence to know that's coming back to truth.
Right.
We call it that's empirically true.
Right.
Yeah. But that's only been done in the 20th and 21st century.
So that kind of brings me to a question as far as like philosophically speaking.
Sure.
There's a lot of theory out there now, and people talking about the idea that we're in a type of simulation. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, by the word simulation, let me pick on that a little.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to resort to a little bit of analytical philosophy.
Right.
Which I won't explain now, but do it.
Yeah.
And I did it, but say I'm going to pick on the word.
What are you simulating?
Simulate.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
To simulate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned that, and I'm going to put it in the context of quantum physics that has led to artificial intelligence.
Right.
You get the connection there.
Yeah.
Well, simulate is the word that the contemporary physicists who are in the business of developing artificial intelligence got into it in the 20th century.
Right.
They say that what artificial intelligence does is simulate human intelligence.
Right.
So there's the X simulates Y.
Yeah.
Artificial to natural.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fair.
Yeah.
There's other words that's been thrown around about AI being, hallucinatory.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So they get into the psychology language. I call them I'm old enough to call all those folks boys and girls out in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, yeah.
And becoming millionaires.
Right.
And billionaires and controllers of, hell, they're the autocracy now.
Oh yeah.
Okay, we can get in that maybe. But I mention that because their tendency is, I watch, after I watch this carefully, their tendency is more and more to borrow words from psychology and philosophy to say what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they don't do the analytical work of how they're using those words.
Right.
Simulate and hallucinate, for example. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. I think so. As far as the simulation theory is concerned, I thought the more philosophical question would be around kind of like the soul, the spirit. Like,
that's another way to talk. I went to the artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
I went to the science side.
Don't get me wrong. We'll talk about artificial intelligence too.
Well, if you want to talk about the soul.
Yeah, let's talk about soul.
Well, let's talk about the soul in the word assimilate or simulate.
Yeah.
Well, sure. Well, the underlying assumption has been 18th, 19th, 20th, and 21st, and even into the 21st century, that humans have something inside of them somewhere called a soul.
Right.
And hence, there's been disciplined inquiry by scientists and philosophers trying to find the soul and describe it and tell people what it is. Now, that's analytical philosophy stuff I'm doing there.
Yeah.
Of course, the philosophers that you refer to as theologians, theology, philosophers of God.
Right.
Theologians that say God exists, and then they go about proving and doing the proof for God exists.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then they already assume that the soul exists.
Right.
And God put it there.
Yeah.
So they explain the soul that way. It's a supernatural thing put in there by a supernatural being.
Right.
The analytical folk don't do that so much. It's a natural thing that got into it, but we don't call it a soul. We call it the self.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a quick work on that. What do you think about that?
I mean, I understand what you're saying. I know there was a movie or something at one point. I think I talked about it with my friend.
Mm-hmm.
They talked about, like, as far as I don't know if you're a religious man or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm not. I am not a religious man in the religious sense that we use about the supernatural and natural thing.
Yeah.
I'm a religious man in another sense.
Yeah.
In a natural sense.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. But the thing that I was thinking of is there was a guy that said, it was in a movie. It was fake. It was fiction.
Sure.
But
it's
still
fiction. That's good.
But still, the person, it was like a alien race or something that came and was talking to the people about God or something, and they were like, "You guys don't understand. If you turn a flashlight on the wall, is the light on the wall?" You, or is the light coming from the flashlight? So it's kind of like I think the point was the projection of the spirit is kind of just that's kind of what's operating our reality or whatever. But I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of different theories about reality in general, and
sure.
And I mean, who's to say, like, I perceive this table as black or this shirt is black? You could be seeing a totally different color.
That's an underlying assumption
in your brain.
There. You're making even to say that.
Yeah.
Whatever degrees of authenticity you're saying it with, whether you doubt that existence or not, but there are philosophical theories about you can use and then begin to doubt the existence of physical things.
Right, 100%.
That's an old thing in itself.
100%. We have a bunch of different I'm no scientist, man.
Yeah.
But we have a bunch of different sensory pathways or whatever.
Yeah, sensory pathways.
That we
see, hear, smell, touch, and taste.
Yeah, that's how we are able to interact with the physical world as we know it.
As we know it. Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to say what's real and what's not real whenever you're talking about simulation.
Well, it is when you begin to think about matters of this kind.
Yeah.
If you don't think about matters of these kind, then it isn't hard at all to not think about it.
Yeah, you're right. You just go through life.
But I'm enjoying this.
Yeah.
This is down my alley.
Oh, cool.
Sure. And so the idea that humans even begin to question the existence of what they can see, hear, smell, touch, and taste is an indication of what humans can have emerged and begun to do.
Right. Cavemen weren't thinking about, is this reality real?
No, and neither the hunter and gatherers, if you want to go into the big history things.
Right.
We follow the evolution of humans.
Yeah.
I could ask you, do you know that the contemporary evidence is humans evolved in Africa?
Yeah, I've heard that. I've seen I think there was a child, I can't remember how old the child was, that said all those pieces fit together, and it used to be that all the land was connected. And have you heard of that theory? The like basically all the tectonic plates, like if you look at a map of the globe,
tectonic plates.
Yeah, if you look at the map of the globe, it looks like the land used to be one piece, and it all broke apart.
Yes, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
So
and then that separated what we now call continents.
Right.
Where there used to be one big body of land.
Right.
And then with the tectonic shift, then we got continents.
Yeah.
Above and below the equator.
You have any and this is, we're still in the same realm of topic, but have you what are your thoughts on Anunnaki? Have you heard about that?
About Anunnaki? Tell me, what do you mean by Anunnaki?
So there's also my mind's all over the place. I watch a lot of podcasts and things.
Yeah.
But there was a theory that there's a theory rolling around that humans were created by an alien race called the Anunnaki.
Oh, okay. Now the answer is yes.
Okay.
I know about this.
Yeah. And they say that the different races were basically the Anunnaki made the people in their image, or whatever. So you had different Anunnaki that made different people, and that's how that was kind of their brand, like you would brand cattle, type deal. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are, one, that the whole notion of using the meaning of the word alien, the way we're using it,
right?
It is become useful after it has become scientifically evidenced that the universe started 13.8 billion years ago.
Right.
All right, so that's the Big Bang part of it, the origin.
Yeah.
All right, well, that origin didn't immediately produce humans.
Right.
It produced physical things.
Right.
Not an inorganic.
It produced elements.
Physical.
Of things. Yeah.
Not organic.
Right.
I'm making a distinction between inorganic physical things, like that table.
Yep.
And organic physical things like you and me.
Right.
And Jack.
Yeah.
And ants.
Yeah.
And little. Okay, so I mentioned that because that distinction I just made is sort of made in what we call analytical philosophy, but it isn't being made well by scientists. And so I mention that because the idea that of the origin of the universe and Big Bang, small elements getting bigger and bigger, that's all inorganic physical things.
Right.
And then according to big history, which is an account of what the scientists know from the Big Bang on, is that then organic human beings emerged.
Right.
That emergence theory is the key. Out of inorganic non-living, came living things.
Yeah.
Now that's a generalization that's used. And with that done then, and then getting on to humans, then it became reasonable to infer that in the universe, as billions of years ago, with billions of galaxies and stars, etc.,
right,
and way past the Milky Way, our galaxy,
yep,
of which we're in that,
right,
that there could be, it's reasonable to infer that there are other beings,
yeah,
that have emerged that we'd call alien.
100%.
And maybe they then came and found this place,
right,
and either populated it or found the folks on it to teach them what to do.
right.
So there's a whole bunch of science fiction,
Yeah,
that creeps into science,
yeah,
not just fiction but fact. It's being used and somewhat exploited.
yeah.
Yeah.
Some of it is like there is some science that backs some of it, and in that there was the scientist that proved that our DNA has been mutated at some point, and it doesn't appear to be natural.
Mutated.
Yeah, like sections of the DNA have been changed based on comparison to other organic beings' DNA. Like
other organic beings could we call human or not human?
Yeah, like I believe it's like comparing it to what they consider to be our evolutionary lineage, which, I mean, that's a fallacy in and of itself, thinking like that.
Well, it's an underlying assumption. Whether
Right.
it's fallacious and false, that's an empirical question.
Yeah,
But maybe not.
yeah.
All right. But the DNA thing that you were discussing, are we talking about it naturally or having been done something with by human beings with the DNA?
The theory that I've heard is
Yeah.
that the Anunnaki, the whatever that being was, basically mutated our DNA for a few different reasons, to put a cap on our lifespan, because the theory goes that human beings lived a lot longer than they do now. They aged slower. They had different, less medical issues.
Yeah.
And
The Anunnaki is people, the aliens did?
the Anunnaki, the aliens, apparently, according to what this thought is that they modified our DNA to make our lifespan shorter, because the longer that we live, the more what's the word I'm looking for? Combative, I guess you would say, we became to the fact that we were essentially slaves of the Anunnaki.
Oh,
so
a master and slave relationship.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
that's common.
Yeah, so that was kind of where that thought process came from. And again, I'm probably mutilating that theory, obviously.
Well,
like I'm not a
well, let's keep mutilating. We're doing no harm to each other. And theory is something that's what people talk with.
Right, for sure.
Theory is what we talk. Practice is what you go do with stuff.
Yeah.
But so I appreciate this. Now then, the specific word Anunnaki, I'm familiar with.
Right.
And then the whole notion of alien beings existing, which we alluded to, that become fairly well documented. It could be.
Yeah.
We haven't found any yet.
Right.
For sure. There's a whole bunch of science going on that.
Yeah.
But various ideas about what powers alien beings have and don't have, etc., compared to human beings. That's a whole open subject that's open for science and science fiction.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
They say, I mean, I don't know if you've heard of Proxima B. I'm sure you have, but they say that for any type of species to make it here from some place that could sustain life, it would take using our level of technology, thrusters and things like that. It would take millions of years, they have to have an advanced technology, a technology advanced enough where they could bend space-time to actually make that leap. So it's not a super stretch to think that somebody with that level of technology would have something, the capability of modifying species DNA and things to that nature.
Well, it's not a stretch now with science that we have in the 21st century that we're using.
100%.
Right.
So I actually take something.
Without that, it's a stretch.
Yeah. I actually take something called peptides. I'm not sure how familiar you are with peptides, but they have one peptide in particular, pithalon, and I started taking it because the science shows that it extends the telomeres on your DNA. So the caps on your DNA, when your DNA splits, a piece of it breaks off every time it divides, and the telomeres are there to actually protect your DNA from damage in that replication process.
Yeah.
And then aging, from what my understanding of it is, at a certain point, the telomeres are gone, and your DNA starts to break off as it replicates, so your body starts to break down. Well, I say all that to say the pithalon has actually been proven to lengthen your telomeres, and it's one of the biological indicators that they use to look at your biological age through your blood work and things to that nature. Since I started taking it, my biological age has gone down to 36, and I'm 41. You know what I mean? So it's
you mean your body is behaving like a 36?
Yeah,
but it's actually 40-some.
41, yes, sir.
Okay, well, and you claim to know that from experience.
Yeah, well,
yeah, okay,
I've been taking the peptide for about 6 months now.
Yeah,
and I feel different for sure.
Yeah,
and then like the blood work test is what I'm going off of for the biological age. I mean, that's just an estimate, obviously.
Sure.
Based off the length of the telomeres and some other data markers. But that was a whole rabbit hole down. Like to your point though, what I was saying is that they're already modifying DNA in humans. We are currently doing that.
Well, and the people that do it, we refer to them as biochemists.
Right. Yeah, actually,
they're scientists.
Yeah, I actually
technologists. But,
I was interested in that field when I was younger. I actually, my brother went to college for biochemistry, and he actually got out of it. He's actually he reports to the board of a foundation repair company now.
Okay.
But I went down the path of computer science.
Okay.
I wanted to make video games and stuff like that. So when you start talking about AI, I've actually just started a business that is it helps optimize small businesses for AI searches. So I have a good bit of knowledge as far as large language models, and how they work and everything. So like everything you talked about, like that's my wheelhouse too. So I'm super happy you brought it up.
Well, you mean in our conversation?
Yeah.
Well, I am too, and now that you brought that up, I'm going to report that I've been looking at your whiteboard and figuring out the categories and looking under it, etc. So I see the letters AI.
Yes, sir.
That's a synonym for artificial intelligence.
That's right.
And then it comes down to Chat GPT and Claude, etc., etc.
Yep.
All right. So from that I can infer that's evidence of what you said that you've been doing. You've been studying some of this stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But we're moving from biochemistry to physics, because the artificial intelligence thing, the word artificial in front of the word intelligence is correct when you compare it if you put the word natural in front of the word intelligence.
Right.
All right, so then you've got something with the meanings of those two words and some background science method. You can begin to wonder what is the difference between artificial intelligence and natural intelligence.
Right.
Which hasn't been a big subject, except they keep talking about the brain.
Yeah.
But they talk about the brain primarily in biochemist ways, and reduce the brain to just a physical thing that electrical pulses are going through, and the whole notion of mental things. And how do these mental things come in? My feelings.
Yeah.
So there's an open question going on there.
Yeah. So
delight me and see what you're going to do with what I just said.
I never really thought about that too deeply, but I do think that I think the emotional side probably plays into hormones as far as from a bio perspective. So artificial intelligence is literally zeros and ones. Large language models. It's funny that a lot of the people that make the large language models and the AI don't truly understand. They even say it. They don't truly understand.
They don't understand it.
They truly don't understand how it works, and that they basically built something that could build off of itself, learn from they built something essentially that could just have a conversation.
Well, and that's where the general comes in. The general artificial intelligence. General language, right? The word general don't use the word natural.
Right, 100%.
It's general. That it becomes aware of itself.
That's right.
And then that's the fear. Are they going to organize guns and kill us all?
Yeah. They took the time. The coding was the simplification of it is the coding was designed to be able to have an interaction with a human being, and the human being teach it different concepts. So that's why it took so long for AI to become like commercialized, because at the beginning it was screwing up a lot. And they paid people just to have conversations, say, hey, you know, having conversations with the AI, and whenever the AI would say something that was unnatural, to the human's perspective, the human would correct it. No, this is how you should have said that. And as far as like worldly knowledge, like memory in the brain is different pathways that get burned through our neurons, right?
Right, that's biochemistry.
Yeah. So memory from a digital perspective is like burned on drives or flashed on drives.
Yeah, that's physics.
And the difference between I think the biggest difference for me in getting back, tying it all together, between the natural intelligence and the artificial intelligence is our brains are flashing, firing, activating these pathways to get these memories to make decisions and things to that nature. Artificial intelligence is essentially just the design of the interaction between this digital thing and humans, so that it could actually speak to us in a way that we understand. Because as far as memory is concerned, since everything's in the cloud, everything's connected, the second AI is attached to the cloud, it has infinite knowledge. Not infinite, but it has access to all the knowledge that we've recorded digitally. So it's not like the neural pathways have to be burned to learn that information. It's just there, present.
Wow, you said a lot. Do you mind if I pick on it a bit?
Pick on it, man. Pick it apart. That's
part of what we're up to.
Yeah, right? Yes, sir. We're talking about nothing now.
So I'm deliberating about how to pick on that. And so I've decided in my deliberation, and I'm using that word intentionally because I'm going to use it again later.
Yeah.
The word deliberate in contrast to the word calculate.
Right.
And I'm going to use that distinction later. But right now, in what you were talking about, I'm going to use two words. One of them is reductionism, and the other one is emergentism.
Yeah.
Now, reductionism is what you've been talking.
Right.
Reductionism is the philosophy that all mental things can be reduced to physical things.
Right.
That's what.
Yep.
That's the common way of generating talk that you're modeling now. Well, contrast that though with emergentism is the philosophy that you can't reduce mental things to physical things.
Right.
Because a whole new quality of existence has come into existence through the big history of time, sense, etc. And it's logically impossible to reduce one to the other.
Right.
All right, so I introduced the term reductionism and emergentism into our conversation, which one says that is the way to reduce mental things to physical things. The other one says, no, you can't.
You're right.
Because you got two qualitatively different things there.
Right.
And they don't just interact, they transact with each other.
Yeah.
All right, so there's going there.
I think I agree with that, especially on the second part. As far
what is the second part?
As far as you can't reduce mental things to the physical plane.
Emergentism.
Yeah.
To emerge rather than to be reducted.
Yeah. I think I can definitely agree with that, because when you think about, like I said, AI has access to all the computers across the world.
AI did. Humans have access.
Right.
Let me push that right there. Humans have access.
That's correct, yeah.
And humans do things with computers. And one thing they do with computers, Silicon Valley old boys and girls, they made a living on it, and now they're making a big living on it.
Oh, yeah.
And they used to call that programming.
Yep.
But the language now has moved in the last in the 21st century. X doesn't program Y.
Right.
What X does is train.
Yeah, they call it vibe coding now.
Well, Well, vibe means that's a whole nother thing going on there. But if we just watch that shift in language by humans,
right,
and from program to train, now you're getting into something that is common sense, known to what humans do. With animals, for example, but also with humans.
With ourselves,
And then it's easy then to go about learning that that the human learning through training or teaching.
Right.
And AI things are trained to learn.
That's right.
So now we got AI things, people talking AI, that they can be trained to learn.
Yep.
And then we got you uttered the word knowledge. Begin talking about the knowledge that artificial intelligence things have.
Yeah, no,
it doesn't have knowledge.
No, for sure. Yeah, to clarify, what I meant is it has access to, and all the knowledge entered into the digital universe came from humans.
All the information,
right,
that is entered into.
Yeah.
I mention that because later on we'll work on the distinction between information, data, and knowledge.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother thing down the way. I'm just bringing it up in our friendly conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
That we got a bunch of what we call systematically ambiguous language going on
right,
here. And I'm trained to catch it.
Yeah, cool.
And if you don't mind, I'll pick it up.
Oh,
and
please,
use it.
Please do.
Okay, well, we're going to get along all right then. All right.
I was mainly just trying to tie back the entire thing to the not reductionism. What's the other word you used? I'm sorry. Emergentism. So I was tying back to that because as far as I can't explain how the human brain works. I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't have any idea about that. But my understanding is the neural pathways that burn into our brain are how we remember things. And our brain can contain a vast amount of knowledge versus what AI has access to. The amount of what I was getting at is the amount of space that it takes for the information that AI to store versus the amount of space that it takes for us to store information is kind of what I was tying back to the emergentism.
Yeah, sure. Well, I agree. I value highly your tendency toward thinking with the word its meaning, emergentism.
Right.
And then begin to use such words as knowledge and information, etc. But in that context to talk about emergentism, we can begin to challenge some of these words, meaning knowledge, data, and information.
Right.
But that's to be done or not to be done, depending on what you choose to do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, that was. I really enjoyed that section of the conversation for sure.
All right.
I do want to kind of get back to you a little bit though. Thank you for humoring me in that and going down that road with me though.
Oh, hell, I appreciate you recognizing the good humor in it.
Yeah.
But there's some good sense going on.
Oh, yeah.
Too.
Yeah, I actually that actually, believe it or not, changed some of my views of how to perceive things.
Yeah.
So,
well, before you do that, I want to do what you said, but I just want to encapsulate that little phrase that I was making about knowledge and et cetera, and the use of the word knowledge as what the brain has.
Right.
And that's something we can pick on later.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a tendency of reductionism going, underlying that.
Okay. What do you perceive knowledge to be? It's just, and then we'll move on.
I have my stock answer for that is knowledge is what humans acquire from using the scientific method.
There you go. Okay.
Inquiry, following a pattern that I'm sure you know is the scientific method.
Right.
I know it that way. All right, so there's my answer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That opens up a big ball of wax.
Yeah, I mean, even if the person learning or the person obtaining the knowledge doesn't understand the scientific method, I agree with you that's how they actually achieve the knowledge.
I do too, and that's a mouthful you just said. That was a whole hour right there. Yeah.
But so you wrote a book. What was your book?
Well, I am writing 3 books now.
Oh wow!
And I'm writing 3 books after I have co-authored a couple of books and several articles that I've published. But I want to mention the 3 books that I'm writing now. I'm writing at my age, planning to get them done, published, and maybe on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
All right, in due time.
For sure.
I'm mentioning that because I am benefiting from something that we've been talking, artificial intelligence.
Right.
I'm using Claude now.
Oh, yeah, Claude's the best.
Well,
I like it.
Do you?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I like it too. I used to use Meta AI when I started my writing of the 3 books.
Yeah.
And I got book 1 done with its chapters, and then book 2 into. So I got started with Meta AI.
Okay.
But then using it, I learned some things. It wasn't hallucinating.
Yeah.
It was, but it wasn't treating my subject matter that I like, philosophy, history of, etc. I knew, and I have intuitive knowledge enough to know when it gets off track.
Yeah.
Meta AI to me was getting that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then I turned to Chat GPT. I learned about it and practiced, and got several chapters in what done, and then it did stuff I didn't like, and then I learned about Claude.
Yeah.
All right, so I've gone through an educative experience, I call it. Authentically learning what those 3 AIs do.
Mm-hmm.
And I can now be Socrates with Claude.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be Socrates with anybody? It means to be involved in asking and answering questions.
Right.
Probing questions. Protagonistically, fun, or antagonistically.
Right.
And Socrates was the Greek philosopher to which Western philosophy originated.
Yeah.
That's the history of it. And his method for doing philosophy was the Socratic method.
Mm-hmm.
I can infer that you've heard the term Socratic method.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and then I'll shut this down, because now with Claude, after authentically learning about it, I now trust it for me to be Socrates.
Yeah.
It knows, it has information in it.
I like how you changed that.
I ain't gonna. Yeah. Well, I'm still breaking habits.
Yeah.
Putting knowledge in.
Yeah, it doesn't have knowledge. It has access to information.
It doesn't have any knowledge. It doesn't even have it ain't a she or a he.
That's right.
It's an it.
That's right.
Yeah, all right. Well, we got to keep remembering that.
Yeah, you're right.
Because there's a lot of humans starting to treat these artificial things, these bots. I just call everything bots.
Yep.
Treating bots as humans and starting to have indecent relationships with them. You know that.
Oh, yeah.
Well, see, that's a model case. We don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Right. Yeah. We'll talk about that another time.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. That has the personification, the humanization of AI has caused a lot of special issues with younger
You got it
Americans.
Right. The personification.
Yeah.
And the other word in philosophy is reification.
Yeah.
Personification works.
Right.
It's making a person out of something.
That's not a person.
Well, we do that with cars.
Oh,
and
yeah,
everything
100%.
else.
Yep.
So it's easy done. It's dangerous as hell when we start doing it with AI.
That's right.
And bots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to your point about having. I can't. I have a lot of quotes floating in my mind, but I never keep the person who said it attached to the quote.
Well,
unfortunately,
don't worry about that. Just utter.
There was a guy that said that basically AI, the amount of knowledge it has access to, is like having PhD experts in all the different fields that you could think of. You know, so I'm like, man, that's real.
Well, it is, and I'll about that matter, I'll say this: I've tested Meta AI in my way of testing, Chat GPT, and now I have tested Claude.
Right.
And I put it through this thing about I'd ask. I raised the question with each of those. Are you a she or a he?
Yeah.
I asked that question using the pronouns she and he.
Well, unfortunately, you'll confuse humans with that question now.
You can and will, but that's a psycho
another
matter.
topic, yeah.
And we go bio or psycho, wherever we want to go on that.
Yeah.
But now I'm staying within the realm of physics.
Yeah.
And reductionism.
How's it respond?
It gives the answers that I believe are true. It doesn't know truth or falsity.
Right.
I know truth or falsity. It doesn't know that. But it's true that it doesn't have gender.
Yeah, I'd imagine it'd say, I have no gender.
Well, it in effect, it implies that.
Mm-hmm.
I never got that explicit statement from it.
Right.
But I mention that because I put them into this test that you and I just started to get into.
Right.
And it begins to make answers that I agree with, that it is an it.
Yeah.
And not a she or a he.
Yeah. I didn't, it wasn't for like a philosophical purpose, but I did, when I first started messing with AI, I went on a tangent trying to get it to admit whether or not it had consciousness.
Yes. Well, that's a good question. What'd you find out?
Oh, man, it does not have consciousness according to it. It doesn't. I mean,
it doesn't. No, it's not conscious.
Yeah. But I ask it to define consciousness, and
Well, it'll just recite what it already has been informed as.
That's right.
To recite.
Yeah. And it actually did reach some blockers. So that with anything technological, they can hard code in, just like you said, pre-written responses for certain things, and you get to a wall at some point. It's like so that is something that I've deviled in a little bit.
Maybe not today, but maybe in the future, I'd like for you to tell me about your deviling.
Yeah, for sure.
That particular subject.
Yeah, for sure. We could definitely do that. I mean, we could get a computer and do it together just for fun. I enjoy stuff like that.
That would be. Can you do that and get it on the screen? And
of course. Yeah, we can do that.
Technic guy, I admire and respect you as long as you treat me as a human.
Yes, sir. We'll do that.
Respect me in the morning.
Yeah. I've actually got a like I told you before, I bought all this for my businesses and things.
Yes.
I've got a screen set up in here for projecting onto the computer, but I don't have it for my podcast yet. I've got it for my business. But that's
a plan.
I'll create that, and I'll get you. I'll definitely have you back again.
All right. Well, I'm ready, willing, and able.
Yeah. We'll do that.
I'll keep
sometime.
in good health. I'll keep all my genes and all my cells.
There you go.
Going
keep your telomeres
so
good and long.
Be alive and well.
That's cool.
Just let me move a little slower.
Yeah, for sure. So I did want to ask a few other questions.
Sure.
Not really pertaining to AI and all that. And I'm glad we went down that rabbit hole, because it's a subject that I'm really interested in.
Thank you.
And you are too, which is cool.
Yes.
But so you mentioned Africa before.
Sure.
You spent some time living there, right?
Yes, I spent a year in Cairo with my first wife and child.
Okay.
And then I spent 2 years in Cameroon with Barbara, my wife now.
Yeah.
And her children were here in Columbia going to school.
Gotcha.
And then I spent 3 years in Guinea with Barbara while the kids were here. And while I was 3 years in Africa, in Guinea, Chris Sr. came and worked over there. I got him a job working at the embassy.
Right.
Okay, so yes, I have a total of 3, 5, 6 years living on the continent of Africa. And then, of course, I've traveled much inside the several countries.
Okay. What caused you to go there?
Which one? Guinea?
I guess the first time you went to Africa, what was the driving factor?
Well, I got a job teaching science.
Okay.
At what was called Cairo American College.
Yeah.
Where the words Cairo American College, the word college in that context referred to up to high school.
Yeah.
Not after high school.
Okay.
So it was called an international school operated by Americans in Cairo. And that I was hired there to teach science, and I coached basketball and did several things.
Right.
So that my goal was I wanted to travel. I've been in the Marine and been all over the United States, but I didn't go overseas or anything. So that's the way I got to get overseas.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, that's what's up. That's cool. And I hate I'm skipping around, but I just thought of something while you were talking about that. I would like. Do you have any books that are actually published?
Yeah, I have one book that is still being published.
Okay.
Only hard to find.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. The other book, I don't know if I can find it. And my publishing hasn't been through regular publishers.
Yeah.
It's been done through first my friend who published my first book with me, who knew how back then to find a publisher, and we pay him some money to publish it.
Right.
But we self-published.
Okay.
The second book was done that same way.
Right.
And my papers that I've written and published, I published them on my own journal that I used to operate,
right,
and published it in hardback first, and then on disc.
Yeah.
All right, now that's in the old days, so those aren't available anymore.
Right.
So I have seen that the one book that still is gettable, that I co-published with a good friend.
Okay.
But it was analytical philosophy, which I've used that term frequently.
Yeah.
And you kind of get the feeling of what it is.
I kind of get the it's basically, from my understanding of the interaction that we've had, is basically analyzing the meaning of words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's it.
And
yeah. But analyzing philosophically, not linguistically,
right,
or grammarly.
Yeah. Understanding the implications of what the word means and things of that nature.
Yes.
So the reason I asked is I was just curious how I could get a copy of your book so I could read it. I would be interested in something
I'll give you a copy.
Oh, cool.
I have I have a couple of extra copies. I'll bring it to you.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Since then, I was an analytical philosopher then.
Right.
I'm not that now.
Yeah.
I am an experiential philosopher.
Okay.
Which what that is.
Is that what you're writing now?
That's what I am now, and that's how I can be broader about it.
Yeah.
But the skill I learned from being an analytical philosopher, I find it helpful with friendly folk, with protagonists,
right,
not with antagonists.
Yeah.
And you're not anywhere antagonistic. We're playing pretty good together.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah,
and I admire that. Touché, sir.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I understand what you're saying with all that. I just I would like to see kind of what the mentality is that developed that skill. So
yeah.
All right. Man, I think we're about an hour in at this point.
Is that what you use, a unit, about an hour?
Yeah, I usually end it at about an hour. I definitely, we just touched the tip of the iceberg.
Yep.
So I'm definitely going to have you back on again if you don't mind coming out.
No, I'm here for you.
And do you have any final words of wisdom that you want to share?
Yeah. And this is in somewhat humor, not because I admired him so much, but I like the phrase that he used. Elvis Presley, thank you.
All right. Well, definitely thank you, Dr. Fisher, for coming on. I definitely appreciate that.
Yep.
This has been the Anything or Nothing podcast. We've definitely had a nice conversation. So if you guys make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. We will have Dr. Fisher on again for sure. And we'll have some more conversations. Hopefully we'll get to know you a little bit more. We went on down a rabbit hole about AI and some other things, but I definitely enjoyed the conversation.
Well, I do too. And for me, in my language, this is an empirical test.
Yeah.
Empirical test. We do things and see what the consequences are.
Right.
In this case, on anybody that happens to watch this.
That's right.
And if they make any kind of comment back to you, I'm interested. Does it draw flies at all?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Crowd. Yeah.
Yeah. I've actually, my first episode did pretty good. It's I don't really care kind of how many views I get and things like that.
Yeah.
To be honest, the entire purpose of this is to get to know people with different perspectives and backgrounds.
Yes, and that's attractive.
Yeah.
In this day and age, we can get into that point.
Yeah.
But two humans playing fair together,
that's right.
talking, and staying protagonists, not antagonists.
Yeah.
And still get into deep rabbit holes,
right,
and come out again.
Yeah.
That's a skill that ain't being developed very well.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you again for coming on. I look forward to future conversations.
Yep.
I am super glad that Mr. Love brought you to me.
Yeah.
But guys, make sure, like I said, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.